You've heard the legend. February 14th, 1933. Bumpy Johnson versus 12 of Dutch Schultz's deadliest killers in the Cotton Club basement. One man walks out alive. He delivers a playing card to Dutch, the ace of spades, covered in blood.
Dutch Schultz, the man who'd killed over 40 people, backs down forever. Harlem becomes untouchable.
That's the story that made Bumpy Johnson a king for 35 years. It's also complete bullshit.
Not because Bumpy wasn't dangerous. He was. Not because Dutch didn't try to take Harlem. He did.
But because the 12 versus 1 massacre never happened the way you've been told. It was theater.
Carefully constructed criminal propaganda designed to accomplish what actual violence never could. Make Bumpy Johnson's reputation so terrifying that nobody would test it.
The real story isn't about a basement fight. It's about how power actually works in the underworld. Violence is temporary. Legend is permanent.
And understanding how this myth was built teaches you more about control than any gun battle ever could.
To understand why the myth was necessary, you need to understand what Harlem was worth in 1933. Harlem in 1933 wasn't the Renaissance anymore. The Depression had gutted the neighborhood. People were desperate.
And when people are desperate, they gamble. The numbers racket, the illegal lottery, was generating millions of dollars a year.
You could bet a nickel and win $50. For people making $7 a week, that nickel was hope.
And hope was the most valuable currency in America. Dutch Schultz saw that currency.
He was a German Jewish mobster from the Bronx who'd made his fortune bootlegging during Prohibition.
But Prohibition was ending, and Dutch needed a new empire. So he looked south to Harlem,
saw all that money flowing through the numbers game, and decided he wanted it. Harlem was sitting on a gold mine, and they didn't even know it. These colored operators, they were running the game like it was a charity. No organization, no muscle, just neighborhood trust and handshake deals. I could professionalize it, centralize collection, skim the top properly. It was business waiting to be taken. There was just one problem. Harlem already had a queen, Madame Stephanie St. Clair.
A Caribbean immigrant who'd built the numbers empire from nothing. She wasn't just a banker, she was a community institution.
And she had an enforcer, a young man named Bumpy Johnson.
I built that operation policy by policy, runner by runner. Every nickel that came through my hands went back into Harlem. I paid for funerals when families couldn't afford them. I kept the lights on in churches. Dutch Schultz thought he could walk into my neighborhood and take what I'd built because I was a woman and I was black. He was wrong.
Bumpy Johnson wasn't typical muscle. He'd educated himself in prison, Shakespeare, philosophy, military strategy.
He understood that respect in Harlem wasn't bought with fear. It was earned with loyalty.
When Madame St. Clair's runners got robbed, Bumpy got the money back.
When dirty cops tried to shake down black businesses, Bumpy made them disappear.
Not always violently. Sometimes just their careers, their reputations.
Dutch sent his representatives in January 1933. Sat down with Madame St. Clair at her club on 133rd Street. The message was simple. Work with Dutch, pay tribute, or get buried. I was standing in the corner, didn't say a word. Just watched these white men sit in our club and threaten our operation. When they turned to me and said, "You want to be smart about this, boy?" I just stared. That stare that makes men check their life insurance. They left, and I knew they'd be back.
But here's what the legend gets wrong. Dutch didn't send 12 killers to one basement. He sent enforcers to dozens of betting parlors simultaneously. This wasn't a single assassination attempt.
It was a systematic invasion, a grinding war of attrition that lasted months, not one night.
The real violence was economic.
Dutch's men would raid a numbers spot, confiscate the day's take, beat the runners. Then they'd offer protection for a price. It was classic extortion, and it was working.
Slowly, painfully, Dutch was squeezing Madame St. Clair out of business.
We were losing ground. Every week, another runner would come to me and say they couldn't work anymore. Too dangerous. Dutch's men were everywhere. I told Bumpy we needed something dramatic, something that would shift the narrative. Because in Harlem, reputation was survival. If people believed we were beaten, we were beaten.
So if the war wasn't decided in a single night, why does everyone believe it was? Because 3 people needed it to be true. Bumpy Johnson, Madame St. Clair, and the Harlem press, who needed a hero narrative.
In the underworld, reputation is currency. If people believe you're untouchable, you become untouchable.
You don't need to fight every challenger if the challengers never challenge you in the first place. The myth was strategic.
It was cheaper than war and more effective than violence.
We didn't invent the story overnight. It grew. Started with a real confrontation. There was a meeting, there were Dutch's men, there was tension. But what actually happened? That's not the point. The point is what people believed happened. We let the story breathe. Let it get bigger with each telling. The number of men grew from 3 to 5 to 8 to 12. The violence got more dramatic.
The Ace of Spades? That came later. Someone suggested it, and I thought, that's perfect. Biblical. Mythic.
Analyze the details. 12 killers. The number is too perfect. 12 apostles. 12 tribes of Israel.
It's not a body count. It's a narrative structure. The human brain recognizes archetypal numbers. 12 signals, complete opposition.
One man against the full force of evil. The Ace of Spades. Playing cards as messages is Hollywood invention, not historical mob practice.
But it's visual, dramatic, the kind of detail that gets repeated because it sounds true.
The Cotton Club basement. The actual Cotton Club downtown was for white audiences. The real Cotton Club in Harlem was an after-hours spot. But examine the logistics. A basement with one exit. Too public for a mob hit. Too risky. The wrong venue entirely. Unless you're not planning a hit. Unless you're planning a story.
The story did what violence couldn't. It made Dutch look weak. Not because he lost men, he didn't, but because he looked like he'd been humiliated. In the underworld, perception is reality. Once the story spread that Bumpy had massacred 12 of Dutch's best killers and sent one back as a messenger, Dutch had 2 choices: deny it and look like a liar, or ignore it and look like a coward. Either way, he lost.
Compare this to other criminal myths. Al Capone and the Valentine's Day Massacre.
Lucky Luciano and the night of the Sicilian Vespers, when he supposedly killed 40 mafia bosses in one night.
Same narrative template. Overwhelming odds, decisive victory, a message sent. These stories follow the same propaganda structure because they work.
The genius wasn't the violence. The genius was making Dutch Schultz believe the story was plausible enough that denying it would make him look defensive.
Bumpy didn't need to kill 12 men. He just needed Dutch to think it was possible.
I heard the story. Everyone heard the story. My men came back and said there'd been a situation, some of our guys got hurt. Then the story on the street was 12 dead, 1 survivor, Ace of Spades. I knew it was exaggerated. But what was I supposed to do? Hold a press conference, say actually only 3 of my men got beaten up? That makes me look worse. So I stayed quiet. And the silence made the myth real.
But here's where it gets darker. The myth didn't just protect Bumpy. It erased the people who actually did the work.
Madame Stephanie St. Clair, the actual architect of Harlem's resistance.
The woman who built the numbers empire, who refused Dutch Schultz's ultimatum, who organized the community response.
In the legend, she's a footnote, a supporting character in Bumpy's story. But the truth? Bumpy worked for her.
I don't blame Bumpy for taking the credit. In that world, in that time, a black woman couldn't be the face of power. The police wouldn't negotiate with me. The other mob bosses wouldn't respect me. So I used Bumpy as my sword. He was brilliant at it, but make no mistake, the strategy was mine. The decision to stand against Dutch was mine. Bumpy executed the plan. I designed it.
The community organizers, the numbers runners who refused to cooperate with Dutch even when his men put guns to their heads.
The betting parlor operators who kept their doors closed when Dutch's collectors came calling. Their names are lost to history.
Because the legend required a single hero. One man against 12. David versus Goliath. You can't have that narrative if you acknowledge it was a community effort.
The economic reality gets erased too. Dutch withdrew from Harlem not because he was scared, but because the operation wasn't profitable. When every runner refuses to work for you, when every bettor boycotts your numbers, when the community treats you like an occupying army, the profit margins collapse.
Dutch was a businessman. He calculated the cost of continuing the war and decided it wasn't worth it. There's an interview from the 1970s. Reporter tracked me down, asked about the Cotton Club story. I was old by then, tired. I told him the truth, or part of it. I said I had 4 guys upstairs the whole time.
They locked the basement door from the outside once Dutch's men went down, trapped them.
I could have killed all of them if I wanted, but I let one live on purpose, because killing them starts a war. Humiliating them ends it.
That admission, 4 guys upstairs, completely undermines the 12 versus 1 myth. But it gets treated as a footnote in the legend.
Because people don't want the truth. They want the story. They want to believe one man can stand against impossible odds and win through sheer will. The truth, that it was a coordinated trap with backup, is less romantic.
The function of the myth in later decades became even more important. As Bumpy aged, the legend kept younger challengers at bay.
Why test a man who supposedly killed 12 professional killers in a basement? The myth was defensive infrastructure. It bought him years of peace. And here's the final irony. The FBI had wiretaps. They had informants embedded in both Bumpy's operation and Dutch's crew.
They knew the Cotton Club story was exaggerated, but they let it stand. Why?
Because it served their narrative that black organized crime was theatrical and emotional, not strategic.
They wanted to believe that Bumpy was a violent primitive who ruled through fear, not a calculating strategist who ruled through reputation management.
The myth made him easier to dismiss.
Bumpy's real genius, his ability to build alliances, to read political shifts, to adapt when the game changed, that all gets lost. Everyone focuses on a fight that probably never happened the way they tell it. And that's the tragedy. The man was brilliant. But the legend made him a cartoon.
So what actually happened on February 14, 1933? The likeliest scenario based on the evidence we have. There was a confrontation, but it was a negotiation, not a massacre.
Dutch sent representatives, probably 3 or 4 men, not 12, to deliver an ultimatum. Meet at the Cotton Club basement, neutral ground.
Hash this out. Bumpy showed up, but he wasn't alone. He had backup stationed upstairs. Insurance.
Dutch's men came in aggressive, thought they had me cornered. But I made it clear, you kill me, you trigger something you can't control.
This neighborhood will burn your operation to the ground. Every runner, every bettor, every store owner, they'll make it their mission to destroy you.
You won't make a dime. And Dutch needs to make money. That's his weakness. He's not in this for pride. He's in it for profit.
The confrontation likely got physical. There was violence. But it wasn't a massacre. It was a brawl that ended with Dutch's men retreating. Maybe one of them got hurt badly enough that the story grew. Maybe Bumpy's guys upstairs locked the door briefly, created panic.
The details don't matter as much as the outcome. The one survivor was probably a messenger who reported back that the deal was off.
That continuing the war would cost more than it was worth. That Bumpy Johnson wasn't going to fold. The Ace of Spades story? Likely invented later. Possibly by Bumpy himself in a moment of showmanship.
Someone asked about the confrontation, and Bumpy, understanding the power of myth, embellished. Added the detail that made the story unforgettable.
I got the message. Not a playing card, a calculation. Harlem wasn't worth the blood it would cost. I had other territories, other rackets. Prohibition was ending, and I needed to pivot. So I withdrew. Not because I was scared of Bumpy Johnson. Because I was smart enough to know when to cut my losses.
Why the exaggeration worked? Dutch had a reputation for extreme violence. The public wanted to believe someone had beaten him at his own game. Harlem needed a hero. Bumpy needed a reputation that would prevent future challenges. Everyone had a reason to let the myth grow.
The myth calcified over decades. Each retelling added more drama. 3 men became 6. 6 became 12.
A shoving match became a bloodbath. The Ace of Spades appeared. The Cotton Club basement became a tomb.
And by the time anyone thought to check the facts, everyone who knew the truth was either dead or had a vested interest in maintaining the legend.
The story didn't end with Dutch's withdrawal. The myth had consequences that lasted decades. The central truth. In the underworld, the story of what happened matters more than what actually happened.
Bumpy Johnson's real legacy wasn't the 12 men he supposedly killed. It was understanding that violence is temporary, but legend is permanent.
The myth made him untouchable for 35 years. Not because people feared his fists, because they feared the idea of him.
I learned something most men never learn. You can't fight every challenger. You'll get old, you'll get slow, someone younger and hungrier will come. But if they believe you're mythical, if they believe you killed 12 professional killers in a basement, they don't challenge you. They negotiate. They show respect. The story did more for me than any gun ever could.
We can't know the exact details of February 14, 1933. They're lost, possibly deliberately. But the larger truth remains: every criminal empire is built on myths like this. The Mafia's code of silence, the Yakuza's honor system, the cartel's brutality, all carefully constructed narratives. The 12 versus 1 story isn't a lie. It's a tool. And understanding how it was built teaches you more about power than the truth ever could. The files are only getting darker from here.
If you found this investigation revealing, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and I'll see you in the next video.